The phone buzzed at 4:27 in the morning. I know the exact time because I'd been watching the battery percentage for 3 hours, the way a surgeon watches a heart monitor, waiting for it to drop from 4% to 3%, calculating how many more minutes I could afford to keep the screen off before it died entirely. 4:17. The buzz was single, short, the specific pulse of a delayed notification rather than an incoming call. And my thumb was on the screen before I was fully awake. One new voicemail. From Elena. Received. Day 1, 11:43 a.m. The timestamp sat there like something that had been waiting for me in a dark room for 9 days. Not a ghost, something worse. Evidence. My name is Marcus Hale. I'm 44 years old. I've spent 21 years climbing cellular relay towers for a living. And if you had asked me on any of those mornings before this one what I understood about communication, I would have told you everything. Signal strength, decibel loss, transmission delay, interference patterns. I understand all of it in the language of diagrams and frequency bands. What I did not understand, until 4:17 on the 9th morning of what I can only call the end of things, was how thoroughly a 47-second voicemail could dismantle a man who thought he had already survived the worst. I did not listen to it, not yet. I pressed the screen dark and lay there in the equipment room of Tower Station 7 on the Eastern Service Road outside Caldwell City, listening to the building creak around me in the November wind. And I thought about Elena's voice, the way you think about a word you cannot quite remember the shape of it, the weight of it, hovering just past reach. Let me tell you what I knew on that morning. I knew that the outbreak had begun somewhere around day 0, which in practical terms meant the Wednesday that every cellular network in Caldwell started logging anomalous traffic patterns, thousands of simultaneous dropped calls, texts firing out of sequence, 911 queues locking into feedback loops. I know this because I was the technician dispatched to investigate Station 7's load irregularities that morning. I was up on the tower at 6:45 a.m. with a signal analyzer in my hand when the first reports started coming through on the work radio. I was still up on that tower at noon when the reports stopped. I climbed down to find a city that had already started becoming something else. I made 2 decisions that first day. The first was to stay at the station rather than try to drive back into Caldwell. The road back passed through the Millhaven district, and even from the tower I could see what Millhaven looked like by midday on day 1: smoke columns, gridlocked intersections, movement that did not follow pedestrian logic. The second decision was to call Elena. The call did not connect. I tried 11 more times across the rest of day 1, no connection. Then the network itself went asymmetric outbound calls, failing completely while the data infrastructure continued processing in fragments, which is a specific failure mode I recognized from the inside because I had spent 20 years maintaining the system that was collapsing. Data packets still moved, calls did not. And then for 8 days, almost nothing moved at all. Her voicemail had been sitting in a server queue since 11:43 a.m. on day 1. It took 9 days for the network to restore enough packet routing for a delayed notification to push through. A 47-second voicemail that she recorded less than 5 hours after I left for work. Less than 5 hours after I kissed her on the cheek while she was still half asleep and told her I would be back by dinner. I put the phone face down on the equipment console. Outside, in the gray pre-dawn, something moved along the service road. I watched it through the reinforced window, a single figure, slow, head tilted at that wrong angle I had learned to read over 9 days. It passed without stopping. They did not tend to stop unless something gave them a reason. I thought about sound. I thought about how a voicemail plays through a speaker. I I thought about Elena's voice filling a room that had been silent for 9 days. I left the phone face down and waited for the light. By the time the sun cleared the tree line, I had already done the inventory I did every morning, which took exactly 12 minutes and told me exactly the same thing. It had told me for the past 4 days. I was running out of time in 3 specific and non-negotiable ways. Food was the least urgent problem, which sounds absurd until I explained that I had found a case of emergency ration bars in the equipment locker on day 2, the kind that telecom companies are required by regulation to store at remote stations for technicians stranded during severe weather events. 12 bars. I had been eating one a day, which meant I had 3 left, which meant food would become a genuine crisis by day 12 at the latest. But food was still 3 days away from critical. Water was closer. The station had a 20-liter emergency supply in sealed containers. I had roughly 6 liters remaining. I had been collecting rainwater in a drainage pan set outside the north window, which I could open 6 inches before the security lock engaged. And the output from 3 nights of light rainfall was approximately 1.4 liters. Water would become critical by day 11, maybe sooner if I had to exert myself. The phone battery was the immediate problem. 4% was a number that had kept me awake for 3 hours. The station's power grid was running on backup generator, and the generator had died on day 6 when I ran out of the diesel in the reserve tank. I had found 1 small solar charging panel in the service cabinet on day 7. The kind used to trickle charge signal monitoring equipment, and I had been using it to pull incremental charge from window light. The problem was November. The problem was cloud cover. The problem was that the panel was rated for equipment that drew significantly less power than a modern smartphone, and across 31 hours of positioning that panel at every window angle I had available, I had recovered exactly 9% battery charge, 4% remaining, 9% recovered in 31 hours. The math was not encouraging. If I listened to Elena's voicemail 47 seconds of audio playback, I would use battery. If the voicemail required me to listen more than once, I would use more battery. Every second the screen stayed on was a calculation I could feel in my chest. I kept finding reasons to delay. The first reason was practical. I told myself I should understand the full communications picture before introducing an emotional variable. This is the kind of reasoning that sounds like discipline and is actually avoidance. But at 5 a.m. in an empty relay station, it was easy to dress it up. I spent 2 hours that morning making a careful survey of what the station's equipment could still do. Most of the active transmission hardware had gone dark when the generator died. The signal monitoring systems, passive receivers, spectrum analyzers still had trickle power from the solar panel. And there was one piece of equipment that had been running continuously on residual capacitor charge since day 1, the station's emergency broadcast uplink. It was not transmitting. The uplink required a deliberate activation sequence and a manual power boost that the dead generator could not provide, but it was receiving. Passively, quietly, it was pulling in fragments of whatever was left on the cellular band's partial packets, data ghosts, the digital residue of a network that was mostly dead, but not entirely. I spent those 2 hours reading that residue. What I found was this. There was a pocket of functional signal routing in the city. Small, inconsistent, but real. Somewhere in the northeastern quadrant of Caldwell, a secondary relay node was still operating. Not broadcasting, the signal was too weak for active transmission, but processing. Maintaining the protocol handshake that kept data packets moving at a trickle. That was how Elena's voicemail had finally reached me. That northeastern node had flickered to life sometime in the previous 12 hours, found Station 7's receiver in its routing table, and pushed 9 days of queued notification data through before the window closed. Which meant that somewhere in Caldwell, someone or something was keeping a relay node alive. I sat with that for a long time. Then I heard the sound from the road, not the slow, drifting movement of a lone infected, but something different. Footsteps, deliberate, uneven in the way that exhausted living people are uneven, not in the way the dead move. 2 sets of feet, a pause, a whispered argument I could not make out through the reinforced wall. I put my hand on the phone without turning it over, and I waited. 2 people. I had not seen living people since day 3, when I watched a pair of figures running flat out along the service road from the elevated catwalk, too far away to call to, moving too fast to be flagged down. I had not tried. By day 3, I had already learned that sudden loud sound near this building was a problem, and I had made a cold-blooded calculation that 2 running strangers were not worth the noise of trying to stop them. But these 2 were not running. They were outside my south wall, and they were arguing in whispers, which meant they had found a reason to stop. I moved to the south window. The reinforced glass was scratched and tinted, and in the early morning light I could see them. A woman in her late 30s, maybe early 40s, wearing a construction worker's high-visibility vest over a dark jacket, with a large pack on her back, and a teenager 16, 17 wearing school clothes that had been through 9 days of the world ending. The kid had one arm in a makeshift sling. They were looking at the station door. The woman saw me in the window. At approximately the same moment, I fully registered her face. She went very still. The kid did not notice me yet. She held up one open hand, not a wave, not a greeting. A pause, like she was asking me to make a decision before she did. I made it. The lock on the station door was a keypad sequence that I had not shared with anyone. I had changed it on day 2. I thought about the 3 ration bars and 6 liters of water and 4% battery and the voicemails still sitting unplayed on my phone. And then I thought about Elena's voice on the morning I left, still half asleep, turning her face into the pillow. And I ran. I unlocked the door. The woman's name was Donna Reyes. She did not offer her last name. I read it on the ID badge clipped to her vest. The kind of weathered plastic county contractor badge that people forget they are wearing. The teenager was her nephew, Owen. He was 17. His left arm had been dislocated. She told me not bitten. She said this first, before anything else, with a flat emphasis of someone who had learned to lead with it, dislocated during a fall on day 4, when they were clearing a collapsed section of fence near the Millhaven water treatment plant, where Donna worked. She had popped it back into the socket herself. Owen had not spoken yet. He looked at everything in the room with the same expression, not fear exactly, but the kind of sustained alertness that teenagers develop when they have been keeping themselves alive for 9 days without any of the adults who were supposed to be responsible for them. He looked at the equipment racks, the solar panel, the emergency uplink. He looked at my face. He looked at the phone I was holding. "Does that work?" he said. His voice was lower than I expected. "Partially," I said. "Can you call out?" "No." He nodded once, and whatever question was behind the one he had asked, he put it away. I recognized that. I had been doing it since day 1, the practice of asking the practical question instead of the real one, because the real one was too large to live in your mouth for long. Donna asked me about the station's capabilities with the directness of someone who had been managing infrastructure crises longer than she had been managing anything else. I told her what I had found that morning: the passive receiver, the northeastern node, the brief window of connectivity that had pushed through the notification queue. I did not mention Elena. I did not mention the voicemail. "What would it take to transmit?" she asked. "Power I don't have," I said. "The uplink needs a boost. The generator is dry." "There's a fuel cache at the water treatment plant," she said. 300 meters northeast. She said it like a statement of fact, like she had already decided that this was the next thing that would happen. Donna Reyes, I would learn over the next several hours, did not separate information from action. A fact was always already a plan. I looked at Owen's arm in the sling. I looked at the phone in my hand. "Northeast," I said. "Northeast," she confirmed. I turned the phone over. 4%. The voicemail notification glowed on the screen. I put the phone in my jacket pocket. Outside, the wind moved through the service road, and something more than one something shifted in the gray space between the tree line and the road. Not close, but not far. "We go at noon," I said, "when we can see everything." Donna looked at the window. Agreed. Owen said nothing. He had found a spot against the equipment rack and was watching the door with those 9-day eyes, and I understood without needing to say it that he would hold that watch without being asked. The morning stretched out between us. Noon came with a cloud cover so low it felt like a ceiling. I had spent the morning hours doing 3 things in rotation: monitoring the passive receiver for any additional data fragments from the northeastern node, managing the solar panel's position through the window to squeeze every possible milliwatt from the diffuse light, and trying not to think about the voicemail. 2 of those 3 things were productive. Donna had used the time differently. She had a worn paper map of the district, a county infrastructure survey, the kind her department would have used for maintenance routing. And she had been marking it in pencil with the kind of notations that came from 9 days of moving through the city on foot. She knew where the dead clustered. She knew where they didn't. She had developed a working theory of their behavior that aligned closely with what I had observed from the tower on days 1 through 3. They were drawn to enclosed spaces that still had interior warmth, which in November meant anywhere with residual heating. They avoided open ground and wind. They did not navigate well across terrain that broke their sight lines. "Drainage channel runs parallel to the service road," she told me, tracing the pencil line on her map. "Concrete walls. They don't tend to walk into it. We can follow it most of the way to the plant." "Most of the way," I said. "Last 30 meters is open ground between the channel and the plant fence." Owen had been listening from his spot against the rack. "How many do you usually see on that open ground?" "Variable," Donna said. He processed this. "That's not an answer." "No," she agreed. "It's not." I had been watching their dynamic since they arrived. It was not a standard aunt and nephew dynamic. There was something older in it, the specific kind of relationship that forms when 2 people have been each other's only resource for long enough that the normal hierarchies stop applying. Donna did not talk down to him. Owen did not defer to her uncritically. They argued efficiently and without cruelty, which is harder than it sounds. We left at noon. The drainage channel was exactly where Donna said it would be, a concrete runoff channel, 2 meters wide, walls rising about 1.5 meters on each side. Dry, cold. It smelled like old sediment and dead leaves, and moving through it meant keeping your head below the level of the road's surface, which meant navigating by sound and the narrow slice of sky overhead. This was not comfortable. It was effective. We moved in a specific order that we established without discussing it. Donna first, because she had the route memorized and the decisive read on terrain. Owen second, because his arm was compromised, and the middle position kept him protected. Me last, because I was the one who knew what we were walking toward, and I needed to be the one who turned back if something changed at the station. I had locked the station behind me. I had the phone in my jacket pocket. For the first 100 meters, nothing happened. Then Donna stopped and held up a fist, and we all went still. Above the channel wall to our left, maybe 20 meters, a figure stood in the middle of the service road, facing away from us. The wind was coming from the northwest, which meant we were downwind. It stood there for 30 seconds that felt like a different unit of time entirely. And then it turned not toward us, but away, and walked slowly toward the tree line. Owen had not moved, had not made a sound. I noted this with the specific attention you give to people when you are deciding whether their survival is something you are willing to prioritize. We reached the northeast end of the channel without further contact. Donna peered over the concrete lip, assessed the 30 meters of open ground between us and the plant fence, and turned back to me. 2, she said. Far side of the fence, moving parallel to it. If we cross now, they're pointed away. If, I said. If, she confirmed. We crossed. The water treatment plant was a concrete sprawl that had been dead since approximately day 2. Judging by the state of the equipment when we got inside, control panels dark, pressure gauges settled into their resting positions, the kind of stillness that mechanical systems settle into when they are no longer being asked to do anything. The smell was chemical and thick, in a way that was unpleasant, but not dangerous. Donna moved through it like a person moving through their own kitchen in the dark, which was exactly what she was doing. Fuel cache is in the maintenance bay, she said. Sub-level. Owen stayed near the entrance, watching the open ground through a narrow window. He had taken a length of metal pipe from somewhere in the first room. I had not seen him pick it up, which told me something about how thoroughly his situational awareness had developed over 9 days. He held it in his good hand without demonstrating it, which was the right way to hold it. Donna led me through 2 corridors and down a concrete stairwell into a maintenance bay that smelled like diesel and machine oil, and the particular cold that basements develop when the heating has been off for days. The fuel cache was exactly where she had described. 6 sealed canisters on a wall rack, each holding roughly 5 liters, the kind used for emergency equipment operation. 30 liters total. The generator at Station 7 had a tank capacity of 25 liters. I had done this calculation twice on the walk over, and both times the answer was the same. If the generator started, if the fuel lines hadn't degraded in the cold, if the uplink systems powered back up correctly, I could run the station for approximately 14 hours at reduced load, long enough to activate the emergency broadcast uplink, long enough to transmit. I started loading canisters into the carry bag Donna had brought. "What are you going to transmit?" she asked. She was helping me lift the second canister, and she asked it the way she asked everything, directly, without cushioning. I thought about the voicemail. "I'm working on that," I said. She looked at me for a moment with the expression of someone who had decided to allow an incomplete answer because pressing for the complete one was not the priority right now. Then she lifted the third canister. "The northeastern node," I said. "I tracked it this morning. It's routing from somewhere in this district." "The pumping station," she said immediately. "On Renner Road. County installed emergency comm equipment there 2 years ago. Solar powered, designed to stay online during infrastructure failures." She said this without inflection, but I heard what was underneath it. She had known this for 9 days. She had been within range of a functioning signal node for 9 days and had not known what to do with the information. "You knew," I said. "I knew there was equipment there. I didn't know if anyone could use it." She looked at me with steady eyes. "Can you?" "If I get power to the uplink at Station 7, yes." Then let's get you power. We carried 30 liters of diesel up one concrete stairwell and across 30 meters of open ground and down a concrete drainage channel in 38 minutes. And I will tell you honestly that I do not remember most of that movement with any clarity. I remember the weight of the canisters. I remember Owen's face when we came back to the channel entrance, the specific loosening of tension around his eyes. I remember that the two figures Donna had spotted near the plant fence had moved north along the perimeter, and that by the time we crossed the open ground, they were far enough away to be irrelevant. I remember that the phone buzzed once in my pocket, and I grabbed for it with a panic that had nothing to do with external threat, and that it was only the low battery warning dropping from 4% to 3%, 47 seconds of audio. I put the phone back in my pocket and carried fuel. The generator started on the third pull. I will not pretend I was prepared for the sound of it. 14 minutes of mechanical silence while I primed the fuel lines and checked the connections and performed the restart sequence I'd memorized from the maintenance manual pinned to the equipment room wall. And then the generator fired and the lights came on, and the equipment racks lit up with standby indicators, and the room was suddenly full of the alive sound of systems waking up. And I stood there for a moment, absolutely unable to move. Owen said quietly, "Is that supposed to happen?" "Yes," I said. "That's exactly supposed to happen." Donna was at the window. "The sound carries," she said. "I know." I was already moving to the uplink console. 30 minutes to full capacitor charge on the uplink. I'll be faster if I'm not interrupted. What I did not say was that the infected in the nearby area would register the generator noise within minutes. Not immediately, they did not sprint towards sound the way they were depicted in the films most of us had watched before any of this was real. They drifted toward it. They accumulated. The window between generator start and the first arrivals at the perimeter was something I had estimated based on 9 days of observation. And my estimate was 40 to 60 minutes, depending on local density. I had 30 minutes before the uplink was charged. I had the voicemail on a phone at 3% battery that I had not listened to. I had Donna Reyes reading the external situation from the window with the focused competence of someone who understood exactly what the generator sound meant. And I had Owen positioned at the door with a length of pipe and 9 days of developed instinct. And I had the specific and private knowledge that I was not going to transmit anything until I had listened to that message. I sat down at the uplink console with the phone in my hand. "I need 2 minutes," I said. Donna looked at me from the window. "2 minutes," I said again. She turned back to the window without speaking, which was the most generous thing she could have given me. I put in my earbuds so the sound would stay private, 3% battery, earbuds, 47 seconds, and I pressed play. Elena's voice came through on the first syllable, and I closed my eyes. She sounded calm. That was the first thing. Not the words, the tone. Elena Hale, who cried at commercials and who called me every day at lunch without fail for 14 years and who kept a running list of things she was worried about in a notes app on her phone. She sounded calm on that voicemail in a way that recontextualized the 9 days I had spent imagining what she had been experiencing. "Marcus, it's 11:43 and I'm at the house. I know you can't pick up. I tried 4 times and the calls aren't going through, so I'm leaving this instead. Because if the network processes it later and you get it, I want you to know where I am, and I want you to know I'm okay. I'm at the house. Don't try to come through the city to get here." The radio's saying Millhaven is closed. They're not saying why, but I can see smoke from the upstairs window. And I know you. You will try to come through Millhaven, and I need you not to do that. Wade paused. Brief. Not hesitation, something more like a measured breath. There's a family 2 houses down, the Parkers, David and his mother. They've been coming over, and I think we're going to move together. Not far, just to the community center on Aldrich. It's concrete. It has its own water supply. And David knows they keep emergency supplies there because he volunteers there. Marcus, I need you to stay where you are if you're somewhere safe. Don't move toward me. I'm going to move towards somewhere better, and I'll find a way to tell you where. Another pause. I love you. This isn't goodbye. I'm saying that specifically because I know how your brain works, and I know you're going to listen to this and turn it into the worst possible interpretation. And I'm telling you directly, this is not goodbye. This is, stay where you are. I'm going to the community center on Aldrich Street. And when things calm down, come find me there. Come find me there. The voicemail ended. 47 seconds. I had been right about the length. I had been wrong about almost everything else. I sat at the uplink console with my eyes still closed and the phone in my hand and the earbuds in. And Elena's voice still physically present in my eardrums, the specific resonance of a voice you have heard every day for 14 years, landing in a silence that had been 9 days of not hearing it. She was not saying goodbye. She was giving me instructions. She was telling me where she was going with the same practical specificity that she brought to every logistical problem. And she was telling me not to be an idiot about it. And she was telling me she loved me in that exact order, which was so thoroughly Elena that I felt something break open in my chest that was not grief and was not relief, but was something that had been sealed under pressure for 9 days and had no clean name. I became aware that Donna was saying my name. Marcus. I opened my eyes. They're starting to drift toward the building, she said from the window. She was not looking at me. She was giving me the information I needed without making me account for whatever was on my face. Maybe 15 minutes before they're at the perimeter. I need to know if what you're doing at that console is going to take longer than 15 minutes. No, I said. I pulled the earbuds out. Give me 8. I turned to the console and I started working. The emergency broadcast uplink was designed for a specific purpose. In the event of a catastrophic failure of the cellular network, a licensed infrastructure technician at a relay station could activate the uplink to broadcast a maintenance signal on the emergency frequency band. The signal would ping the network's central routing system, identify the station's operational status, and allow the system to reroute traffic through the functioning node. It was not designed to transmit personal messages. It was also not designed to be connected to a civilian smartphone. These two facts were, in my professional assessment, obstacles rather than prohibitions. I had known since day one that the uplink had a secondary data port that predated its current software, a legacy interface from an earlier version of the system that had been physically retained on the hardware, but was not included in any of the current documentation because no one had used it in approximately 12 years. I had known about it because I'd been the technician who installed the retrofit on this specific station in 2013, and I had noted the legacy port in my field log, and then forgotten about it, the way you forget about infrastructure that does not currently require your attention. I had been thinking about it since day 3. The port accepted a standard 3.5mm audio input. My phone had a 3.5mm headphone jack. It was an older model, which Elena had teased me about every time a new phone came out, and which I had defended on the grounds that I used it for work monitoring, and the jack mattered. The jack mattered now. I made the cable connection with components from the station's maintenance kit. I wrote a manual override sequence into the uplink's control interface, not the broadcast function, which required network authentication I did not have, but the test transmission function, which was designed to be used by field technicians without central authentication, and which, when I redirected its output through the legacy port, would carry whatever audio signal I fed it on the emergency frequency band. It would not reach Elena's phone directly. The emergency frequency band was a maintenance channel, not a consumer channel. What it would reach was the northeastern node, the Renner Road pumping station that Donna had identified, which was solar-powered and actively routing. If that node's emergency receiver picked up my test transmission and logged it, it would become part of the network's packet routing record. If the network continued its partial recovery, if the routing expanded, if more nodes came online, my transmission would exist in the system as a data fragment. It would sit in a queue, the way Elena's voicemail had sat in a queue. For 9 days, until a window opened. 12 minutes, Donna said from the window. Her voice was still controlled, but the cadence had shifted to slightly faster, slightly flatter. The kind of shift that means the situation has moved from managed to active. They're clustering near the east corner. Owen. I see them, Owen said from the door. He had not moved from his position, but I heard something in his voice that had not been there before, not fear. The specific raised stakes focus of someone who has just elevated from watching to preparing. 2 more minutes, I said. Marcus. 2 minutes, Donna. I picked up the phone. 3% battery. I had a 47-second message to answer. I had approximately 90 seconds of battery life if I was careful. I had 2 minutes before the situation at the perimeter became a decision. I pressed record. I had not prepared what I would say. I want to be honest about that. I had been moving toward this moment for 9 days, for 21 years, in some ways. And when the recording was running, I had nothing prepared. I had only what was true, so I said what was true. Elena, it's Marcus. It's the 9th day. I'm at Station 7 on the Eastern Service Road. I'm okay. I got your message. I paused. Outside, I could hear them now, not loudly, not the way they sounded when they were moving with purpose, but the ambient presence of accumulation that I had learned to read over 9 days. The texture of a perimeter beginning to be tested. I didn't listen to it until this morning. I don't have a good reason for that. I've been telling myself it was about the battery, and the battery was real. But it wasn't the whole thing. I think I was afraid of what you were going to say, and I was wrong to be afraid. And I'm sorry it took me 9 days to hear it. Donna said nothing. Owen said nothing. The generator ran its steady bass note underneath everything. The community center on Aldrich. I know where that is. I know exactly where that is. I'm going to get there. I don't know when there are things here that need to be resolved before I can move. And when I tell you about them later, you are going to say I should have left sooner, and you are going to be right. You are almost always right about those things. A small pause. Not calculated. Just true. I'm transmitting this on the emergency band through the Station 7 uplink. I don't know if you'll ever hear it. I think you might. I think the network is recovering in pieces, the way things recover. And I think if this gets cued the same way yours did, it might come through. And I need you to know that I heard you. I heard everything you said. Stay where you are. I'm coming to find you. I stopped the recording. The phone battery was at 2%. I connected it to the uplink input, initiated the test transmission sequence, and transmitted the recording on the emergency frequency band. The whole process took 31 seconds. The uplink status indicator shifted from amber to green, held for the duration of the transmission, then returned to standby. Somewhere in the northeastern quarter of Caldwell, a solar-powered node received the signal. I do not know what it did with it next. Marcus, Donna said. Now. I disconnected the phone, shut down the test transmission interface, and stood up from the console. They had come in from the east corner and the south fence line simultaneously, which was not coordinated behavior. They were not capable of coordination, but was the specific kind of convergence that happens when a stimulus affects multiple sources at roughly the same time. The generator sound had been running for 40 minutes. The clustering was predictable. I had predicted it, which did not make standing on the right side of a reinforced door while it was tested from the wrong side any easier to process emotionally. The station door was solid metal, outward opening, locked from the inside with both the keypad and a manual deadbolt I had reinforced on day 2 by wedging a section of equipment rack steel through the interior handle bracket. This modification was not subtle, and it was not reversible. I had essentially welded a brace into the door mechanism using the available tools, which meant the door would hold as long as the bracket held. And I had no way to test how long the bracket would hold. And this was the kind of engineering uncertainty that I found profoundly uncomfortable. "Roof access," I said. Donna turned from the window. "What?" "There's a roof access hatch in the storage room. Tower maintenance access. It opens onto the catwalk that runs up to the base of the antenna array. I had used it every working day for 3 years before they assigned me to infrastructure oversight instead of fieldwork. They can't climb the hatch ladder." Owen was already moving toward the storage room door. Donna was doing the assessment I could see happening behind her eyes, the angle of the roof, the drop from the catwalk edge, the sight lines from the elevated position, the problem of 3 people on a metal catwalk in November wind, while an accumulation of infected tested the door below. She was looking for the failure modes, the way I looked for signal interference, not to be discouraged by them, but to know exactly where the system would break. "How long do we need to be up there?" she asked. "Until they lose interest. Without an active sound source, they typically disperse within 2 to 3 hours. The generator. I'm shutting it down." I crossed to the generator panel. Once the sound stops, the stimulus stops. "Will the uplink?" "The uplink already transmitted. The capacitors can hold the monitoring systems in standby for another 6 to 8 hours without the generator running." I reached for the shutdown switch. This is now purely a noise problem. The generator died mid-note, and the silence that replaced it was so sudden and total that for a moment all 3 of us stood absolutely still, recalibrating. The equipment racks hummed softly in standby. Outside, the irregular pressure against the door continued for 15 seconds and then gradually reduced. Not gone, reduced. "Roof," Donna said. We went up. The catwalk was exactly as I remembered it, galvanized steel grating. 3 feet wide, running horizontally around the base of the antenna tower before the climb ladders began their vertical rise. In working conditions, I had always found it mildly vertiginous at the south edge, where the view opened over the tree line toward the city. I had never found it vertiginous enough to concern me, because I had spent 20 years training myself not to be concerned by heights. What concerned me now was the view. Caldwell, from the catwalk height of approximately 12 meters, did not look like a city 9 days into a catastrophe. It looked like a city that had been very gradually emptying for a much longer time, the specific stillness of a place that has had life pulled out of it by degrees. Smoke columns from day 1 had long since died. The intersection gridlock that had been visible from the tower on day 1 had resolved into abandoned vehicles, most of them exactly where they had been when their drivers left them. The Millhaven district's skyline was intact. No collapsed buildings, no fires, just the November sky and the quiet. "It's bigger than I thought," Owen said. He was looking at the infected below us, not speaking with fear, but with the calculating attention of someone revising an estimate. There were 11 of them in the immediate station perimeter, drawn by the generator sound, moving in the directionless drift of a stimulus that had been removed before they could locate its source. From above, the slow-motion quality of their movement was more apparent than it was at ground level, the way they turned without purpose, reorienting constantly toward sounds that weren't there. 11 is manageable, Donna said. When they disperse, I said. Not before. She did not argue with this. She sat against the antenna tower base with her map in her lap and her pack beside her, and she began the next layer of planning with the same methodical energy she brought to everything. And I stood at the catwalk railing and looked at Caldwell and thought about the Aldrich Street Community Center, which was approximately 4 kilometers northwest of where I was standing, and which I had driven past on my way to work hundreds of times without ever registering as anything except background city. Owen came to stand beside me at the railing. We stood there in the cold for a few minutes without talking. "The voicemail," he said eventually. "It was from your wife." It was not a question. "Yes," I said. "Is she okay?" I thought about Elena's voice. Calm, practical, giving instructions. The specific competence of someone who had already made their assessment and moved to action while I was up on a tower watching the city's signal infrastructure dissolve. "I think so," I said. "I think she was okay when she recorded it." Owen looked at the city. "My parents are in the Western District," he said. "I've been trying not to think about the math on that." I did not tell him the math was good. I did not tell him it was bad. I said, "Donna got you this far?" He considered this. "Yeah," he said. "She's operational." He said it with a 17-year-old's attempt at dry understatement. And underneath it was a weight that was not dry at all. And I recognized the defense mechanism from the inside. "My wife would say the same thing about me," I said. "Operational." He almost smiled. Below us, the 11 infected continued their directionless drift. Slowly, so slowly, it was almost peaceful from this height, they began to separate, pulled by the small ambient sounds of wind and bird movement and the distant city. And the perimeter began to open. We came back down at 2 p.m. The perimeter was clear enough, and 6 of the 11 had drifted east, back toward the tree line, and the remaining 5 were spread widely enough around the station that moving between them with careful, wind-checked timing was possible rather than suicidal. Donna made this assessment standing at the base of the roof hatch ladder, with the focused efficiency of someone who had been making exactly these assessments for 9 days. And then she looked at me with the question she had been holding since the morning. "Aldrich Street," I said. She blinked once. "How do you know about Aldrich Street?" "The voicemail." Something in her expression shifted, not dramatically, but I had been watching Donna Reyes's face for most of a day, and I had learned to read the small movements, something that was not surprise, exactly, more like confirmation of a calculation she had been running without completing. "The community center," she said. "You know it." "I know it's approximately 4 kilometers northwest." She looked at her map. "I know it's a legitimate shelter option. I've known it since day 4. Her voice was level, and she was not apologizing. But I heard the structure of why she had not moved toward it, why she had been moving. Instead, in tightening circles around this district rather than committing to a destination. "Owen's arm," she said finally. "He can walk," I said. "He can walk now." Her voice was still level. 4 days ago, he couldn't walk 100 meters without... She stopped. "It doesn't matter." "It does matter," I said. "It was the right call." She folded the map and looked at the door. We have two options, I said. We can move tonight, lower visibility, lower encounter rate, but higher navigation risk and colder. Or we move at first light tomorrow, better visibility and temperature, higher encounter rate in the early activity window. First light is better, she said. Owen needs to sleep and so do you. And I need to finalize the route. I nodded. Marcus. She was looking at the uplink console. Did it transmit? Yes. Do you think it will reach her? I thought about the northeastern node, the solar power, the packet routing recovery, 9 days of a voicemail waiting in a queue. I think the network is doing something unexpected, I said. I think it's recovering in a pattern that doesn't match the failure model. I paused. I think the probability is real. Donna nodded once, crisply, as if I had given her a load-bearing number. I checked the phone. 2% battery. I had been rationing this moment for 3 days, and now there was almost nothing left. And I made the decision to leave the solar trickle on the phone overnight and see what the morning brought. I set up the monitoring display in passive mode, and the three of us arranged the equipment room into something that functioned as sleeping arrangements floor space, allocated with a minimum of discussion. First watch established without negotiation because it was obvious that Owen would take it. Because Owen had been taking it without being asked for 9 days, and it was a form of contribution that mattered to him. I lay on the cold floor and thought about Elena's voice. This is not goodbye. I held on to that for a long time. Then I slept. I woke at 5 a.m. to Owen saying my name and the monitoring display showing something I had not expected. The northeastern node was active again. Not a flicker this time, not a brief window. The passive receiver was logging a sustained handshake signal from the Renner Road pumping station, consistent and strong. And appended to the routing protocol it was sending out was a data fragment, a small packet, flagged for delivery to Station 7's registered address in the network routing table. A queued notification. I was sitting at the console before I was fully awake, and Owen was behind me, and Donna was awake in the time it took me to pull up the packet's metadata. And we were all three looking at the screen when I saw the sender tag. It was not Elena's number. It was a county emergency services routing address, the automated system that the county's emergency communication infrastructure used to push alerts. Not a personal message. A broadcast fragment. The kind that the county's automated network was designed to push to all registered relay stations during declared emergencies, except that this one had been queued since day 2 and was only now finding its routing path. A county emergency alert. Text only. 94 words. I read it twice. It listed 3 active emergency shelter locations that County Emergency Services had confirmed as operational as of day 2. The Millhaven Sports Complex, the Eastern Memorial Hospital Annex, and the Aldrich Street Community Center, confirmed open and staffed as of 11 a.m. on day 1. With an estimated population of 67 civilians and access to emergency water and ration supplies. 67 civilians. Day 1, 9 days ago. I sat back from the console, and I did not say anything for a long moment. She's there, Owen said. Not a question. The flat certainty of someone following a logical sequence to its end. She was there on day 1. I said. I don't know about. She's there, he said again. I looked at the screen. I looked at the routing timestamp on the packet. 4:51 a.m. Delivered 6 minutes ago, which meant the window was currently open. Actively open, right now. The transmitter, Donna said. I turned to look at her. If the node is active now, if the window is open now, can you send a directed query to the shelter's emergency comm equipment? Can you ask for a status confirmation? I thought about this with the speed that comes from 20 years of knowing a system from the inside. The shelter would have county emergency comm equipment, the standard package for designated public shelters, which included a low-power emergency receiver and a basic status flag transmitter. It would not allow voice communication, but it would respond to a properly formatted network query with a status flag, operational or non-operational, or no response. 62 seconds to format the query, 12 seconds to transmit. The window might still be open. The shelter's equipment might still be powered. I might get an answer. I turned back to the console and started working. The query transmitted at 5:09 a.m. I sat at the console and I watched the passive receiver and I counted seconds, and I did not let myself think about what a non-response meant. Because the things a non-response could mean were numerous, and not all of them were bad, and catastrophizing in the direction of the worst interpretation was the thing Elena had specifically told me not to do. Come find me there. At 5:14 a.m., the monitoring display registered an incoming data packet from a registered county emergency shelter address on Aldrich Street. Status flag, operational. Secondary data field, which I had not expected, and which meant that someone at the shelter had engaged the extended status protocol, which required a deliberate human action and was not an automated response. Population 71. Stable, query received who is asking. 71, up from 67. People had been arriving. Query received who is asking. Someone at that shelter had seen my network query come in on their emergency receiver and had sat down and typed a response. I typed back in the query field, the only communication channel the system allowed. Plain text, 90-character limit. M. Hale Station 7 Infrastructure Tech. Elena Hale confirm present. I transmitted it. Owen had one hand on the back of my chair. Donna was at the window, watching the pre-dawn light build. But she was not looking at what was outside the window. She was listening to the console. The response came back in 4 minutes and 11 seconds. E. Hale present. Stable. She's been asking about you for 9 days. I read it 3 times. And the third time, my hands were not entirely steady on the console, and I was aware that the monitoring display was slightly blurred. And I did not attempt to explain this to Donna or Owen, because it did not require explanation. Owen put his hand briefly on my shoulder and then removed it. Donna turned from the window. "We should move in the next 40 minutes, she said. Her voice was its usual concrete and frequency band practicality. And she was looking at the display with an expression that was not her professional expression at all. And she turned back to the window before I could study it too closely. Light is almost good. I want to move while the encounter rate is still low. 40 minutes, I said. I typed one final message into the query field. Coming, 4 kilometers. Today. I transmitted it and closed the channel. The monitoring display held the last received message on screen. I looked at it for 10 seconds. She's been asking about you for 9 days. And then I stood up from the console. The phone in my jacket pocket was at 3%, recovered overnight from the solar trickle. I turned it on. Elena's voicemail notification was still there. One new voicemail, and I pressed play one more time, not because I needed to hear the instructions again, but because I wanted to carry the sound of her voice in my ears for the 4 kilometers between here and there. This is not goodbye. I put in the earbuds and listened to all 47 seconds. Then I pulled the earbuds out and put the phone away and shouldered the pack I'd been living out of for 9 days, and I went to the door. Ready? Donna said. Yes, I said. Owen picked up his pipe. His arm was still in the sling, but his posture had shifted overnight into something more forward-facing. and I understood without asking that the county alert had changed his calculation too. Not about Aldrich Street, which was not where his parents were, but about the idea that shelters were real, that destinations existed, that the map of the world still had places worth moving toward. I opened the station door. The November morning was gray and cold and very quiet, and the service road was clear in both directions as far as I could see. And the city waited 4 kilometers northwest with whatever it had become in 9 days. We walked into it. I have thought about why she called it not goodbye rather than calling it hello. I think it was precision. Elena has always been precise in the way that matters, not pedantically precise, not the kind of precision that corrects other people, but the kind that knows exactly which word carries the weight she needs it to carry. She was not saying hello because hello is a beginning, and that was not what she was recording. She was recording an interruption. She was recording a comma in a sentence that was still going, and she needed me to understand that the sentence was still going. And she chose the word that communicated that most efficiently. Not goodbye. We reached the Aldrich Street Community Center at 9:47 a.m. The walk took 2 hours and 43 minutes and included 2 route diversions and one 11-minute wait in a loading bay doorway that I will remember as the longest 11 minutes of a 9-day stretch that contained many long minutes. We were not alone when we arrived. Donna had been accumulating people the way she accumulated information, systematically and without ceremony. And there were 2 other survivors who had joined us on the last kilometer, following the same route, logic toward the same destination for their own reasons. Elena was in the main hall. She saw me from across the room. She looked exactly like herself. Tired in the specific way that 9 days of sustained alertness produces, wearing a jacket I didn't recognize, hair shorter than I remembered because she had cut it herself at some point. But herself, absolutely herself. And she walked toward me with the same directional certainty that she had in everything. We did not speak for the first few seconds. There was nothing that needed to be said that hadn't already been transmitted on the emergency frequency band and received and confirmed and replied to. We had been having this conversation for 9 days, in the only medium that was still working. What I know now, standing on the far side of those 9 days, the network does not have to be perfect to carry something true. It just has to be alive enough in the right moment. It just has to have one node still routing, one window still open, one queued message still waiting for the path to clear. She had been asking about me for 9 days. I had been answering without knowing she could hear. Somewhere on the emergency frequency band, in the data logs of a solar-powered pumping station on Renner Road, the audio record of a 47-second reply still exists. I don't know who will ever find it, or if the equipment will outlast the recovery long enough for it to matter. But it went out. It was received. The acknowledgement came back. That's what communication is, when everything else fails. Signal, receiver, confirmation, message delivered.